Yatvaneha punyanya tavyamavashishite. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Now I should declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and nominous. This being known, nothing further will remain for you to know. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Complete knowledge includes knowledge of the phenomenal world, the spirit behind it, and the source of both of them. This is transcendental knowledge. The Lord wants to explain the above-mentioned system of knowledge because Arjuna is Krishna's confidential devotee and friend. In the beginning of the 4th chapter, this explanation was given by the Lord and is again confirmed here. Complete knowledge can be achieved only by the devotee of the Lord in disciple succession directly from the Lord. Therefore, one should be intelligent enough to know the source of all knowledge, who is the cause of all causes and the only object for meditation in all types of yoga practice. When the cause of all causes becomes known, and everything knowable becomes known, and nothing remains unknown. The Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad, says, Kasmin u Bhagavato Vigyate Sarvam Idam Vigyatam Bhavati. So I'll read the verse again. Jnanam deham savigyanam idam vakshami sheshitaha yat gyatvaneha punyanya katam avashishite. I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and nominous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyatyade Satarane. In this verse, Krishna is talking about two kinds of knowledge. One is one is called jnana, theoretical knowledge, and the other is called vijnana, realized or experienced knowledge. It's only by experienced knowledge we can come to the platform of what Krishna says, asamshayam samagam mam. You can know me in full, free from doubt. Well, what is doubt? Doubt is the fact that currently the soul, ourselves, we're in a material body, and our body is made out of senses, and the senses are all imperfect. That is, we don't actually see things as they actually are. We don't hear things as they are. We don't taste things as they are in conditioned life. For instance, if there was a big feast with globidamins and samosas and pakoras and other things, but we were invited to come to the feast, and it was mandatory that everyone wears a glove on their tongue. Just like nowadays, they're saying that if you wear a mask, then it's very healthy. If you breathe your own carbon dioxide, that's very healthy. Although in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about prana, that prana is the life, air, and the yogis, they utilize prana in order to elevate their consciousness. And there's something else called apana. There's prana and apana and different types of air. But Krishna recommends we breathe in prana in order to get energy. But nowadays, somehow or another, people have figured out that if you breathe in something that has no prana, that will make you healthy and safe. Similarly, if we have a glove on our tongue for the Sunday feast, I don't think it's going to make all the preparations taste better. As a matter of fact, it's when we take the glove off our tongue that we can finally taste what the preparations are actually like. So these materialized senses are just like coverings over the real sense, our real senses, our spiritual senses. Therefore, Krishna says, Atakshi Krishna Namani Nabravad Crime NGI, that currently the senses are contaminated or covered. What are they covered by? They're covered by the desire to be independent of, well, basically speaking, they're covered by lust. And what is lust? It's the force that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that impels us to serve our senses. That, normally speaking, the material nature, which is made out of different energies, namely earth and water and fire and air and ether, as Krishna will explain in next verses, is not actually very enjoyable. In other words, when we talk about earth, we're not talking about just like some mass of earth, some that you dig up in your backyard. We're talking about the principle of energy, something that has different properties, such as being solid, as compared to something like ether, which is not perceivable by our present senses. But earth has certain qualities like smell. You can put something on earth. It has, you can see it with your eyes, you can smell it with your nose. Certain types of earth you can hit on and it'll make a sound. So it has all the properties of all the other elements, but its main property is stability, which neither fire, nor air, nor water, nor ether have. So earth is energy which is stable. Similarly, the more subtle element, which is known as water, has all the properties of the other elements before it, but it doesn't have stability unless it's frozen, and then water in a frozen state is not its natural state. Its natural state is liquidity. So water has, we can perceive it, we can hear it, we can't smell it. We can taste it though. Similarly, we go up the chain to fire. Fire we can perceive with our senses. It has no stability though. We can't hear it unless it's burning something. We can't smell it. We smell what's being burned. And so fire has the property for transformation, as water has the property for cohesion. If we take some dough or some flour and we add water to it, the dough will cohese and we get dough. Similarly, fire has no property for cohesion or for stability. We can't put anything on fire, but it has the property of transformation. Fire can transform one energy to the next. When we put our food into our stomach, which has a kind of fire in the form of acid, then it transforms that from one state to the next, that food. So fire has a property for transformation. And similarly, we have air. Air doesn't transform anything. It has no stability. It can't cause things to come together and cohese. But it has the property to move things. When we eat something, it's the air in the body that moves that food that we ate from one part of our body to the next through the digestive system. Similarly, it's air that moves the planets in their orbits. So air has the property of movement. As we can see, on a windy day, we don't necessarily see the air, but we see the air moving things. Similarly, ether, which is imperceivable to us, doesn't have the property of either moving things or transforming things or cohesing things, or ether has no stability. We can't put anything on ether, but ether is a place in which everything fits into. Similarly, there are other elements such as mind, intelligence, and false ego, which are even more subtle and have different properties. So these are things we're perceiving in this world, and these energies definitely have properties. But these properties are in themselves not enjoyable. We only perceive them as enjoyable when we add something called kama, or lust, which has its varieties of manifestations such as anger, greed, delusion, madness, enviness, etc. The idea that this material nature is enjoyable, obviously there must be something which is called enjoyment in the material world. This is actually based upon ignorance. Our so-called enjoyment is actually the alleviation of my suffering. So this is called theoretical knowledge. Theoretically, we can understand that this material energy in itself is not the cause of any kind of happiness. If you collect a bag of earth and water and fire and air and ether, and you bring it home with you, there's not much you can do with it to enjoy it. But if that bag is put into a certain shape, then we think it's actually become enjoyable. So this is called mental concoction. But because of the energy that Krishna has called kam, lust, and krodha, and lust, anger, and greed, then we actually think that we're actually going to enjoy. But actually what we're enjoying is simply the absence of our suffering. For instance, my finger doesn't cause me so much enjoyment. But if I take a hammer and I hammer my finger a couple of times, it's the cause of great suffering. But if I go to the doctor and the doctor somehow or another gives me some anesthetic or puts my finger back in its proper shape, then a week later I say, someone asks me, how are you doing? I say, oh, I feel good now. Actually, I don't feel good. I just feel the absence of pain that my finger was going through. So the material world consists of this idea that we can be happy in the absence of suffering. But the so-called knowledge that we can be happy by the absence of suffering, this is called ignorance. We can simply suffer less, but that's not real happiness. So Krishna will explain what real knowledge is. For instance, in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, Denosmin yatha dehe komaram yovanam jara. That the body's changing. This body that we take is our most beloved object in the universe. Which body? We've had so many bodies. We've had a baby body. We have this body now. And we'll soon get another body, completely different body. Whether today or in 10 years or in 25 years, well, this body will not exist anymore in any form whatsoever. So Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita, the body's changing, but we ourselves are not changing. So this is called theoretical knowledge. So Krishna begins Bhagavad Gita with this theoretical knowledge. Now, because people don't accept Krishna as an authority, therefore they don't even accept the most obvious experience that we have. So this is called ignorance. Namely, if people cannot accept that their body is changing, but they themselves are not changing, then they're in the darkness of ignorance. In other words, according to the title of this lecture, such people are actually crazy. Or as Queen Kunti says, now the question is, Why does Queen Kunti says people have become crazy? Because she says that anyone who thinks that increasing their material entanglement by getting more wealth, by getting a better, more material influence, by becoming more materially learned or possessing bodily beauty, then they're making advancement. But the question is, who's advancing? If the soul is not realizing what his eternal nature and is still caught up in the temporary material existence, still suffering the miseries of material existence, still fearful of the future, no matter how much wealth one has, and how much personal beauty, how much material knowledge one may have, no matter how much influence may have, if one is always fearful, what is the value? Just like Hiranyakashipu, our favorite example. He was the master of the universe, or at least a good part of the universe, and he had unlimited resources. But Prahlad Maharaj was not very impressed by Hiranyakashipu. Although Hiranyakashipu had some theoretical knowledge, because after the death of his baby brother, Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu had to satisfy his relatives by explaining to them, Denosmi nita dehe. Don't think that Hiranyaksha has died. He's still existing, but in another form. I'm sure he's as good a demon as he was before, so don't worry. He may have left his body, but he's just as wicked as he ever was. He'll make you proud. So Hiranyakashipu understood theoretically that he was not his body. So at least he had that much theoretical knowledge. He also understood that unless he became immortal, then all his so-called assets in the material world were useless. Because if you have some material asset, billions of euros or whatever monetary, or rubles, or whatever else, if you have billions and billions and all the material assets that you could buy with such money, but if you only had it for a billionth of a second, what would be the value of it? So in the present society, people have little knowledge. They think that by gaining material assets, they can become happy. They don't understand the existence of the soul, and therefore they're completely in ignorance. Or as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ukramantam stitim vapi punjana va gunandita, that the foolish, they cannot understand how the living entity quits his body. Nor can they understand what kind of body one is enjoying under the spell of the material nature. But those whose eyes are trained with knowledge can see all this clearly. So Krishna is training Arjuna's eyes to see, at least theoretically, with knowledge. Just like, again, with a little intelligence, we can see how this material body that we're presently in is always changing. But we ourselves, the perceiver of this body through our consciousness, we're not changing. So this should make the headlines in all the newspapers in the world. The speaker of Bhagavad Gita has discovered we're all the secret for eternality, has revealed to us that we're all eternal. So everyone should be joyous. Even people in the hospital about to die should be jumping up and down in their beds with their arms raised. We're eternal. We're not going to die. No problem. No worries. But where is that in the newspapers? Where is that in the universities? Who is being trained like that? the most basic reality that everyone can understand theoretically. Even a child of 5 years old can understand. But these so-called scientists, philosophers, government leaders, they cannot even understand the most basic principle of reality. Therefore, they're considered in the Srimad Bhagavatam as Gokara. Anyone who can understand this most basic knowledge is on the level of a cow or an ass. And therefore, whatever they're doing is called Shramam Eva Hi Kevalam. It's just a waste of time. They may be collecting titles, just like and they have PhD, MD, whatever they have, but they're simply pretenders that they have knowledge, because actually they're in ignorance. Just like children may get together and elect someone the king. But what is the value of children electing someone as the king? They have actually not become anything but pretenders to be kings. Similarly, there may be some knowledge of how the material nature works, but since they don't know how the spiritual nature works, and they only have imperfect knowledge of how the material energy works, therefore they're on the same level as a cow and an ass. Even a dog knows where to find the bone. Even the cow understands the process of eating grass. Even a tiger knows the martial arts better than any martial artist. Even a pigeon would make a playboy seem rather insignificant. So this knowledge of eating, sleeping, mating, defending is actually not knowledge, it's ignorance. Although one may take credit of how wonderful we become, but actually, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, this expansion in the material knowledge is simply making more people more and more foolish. Srila Prabhupada didn't decry knowledge of computers and whatever phones they have, or rockets, whatever else, dictic phones, Prabhupada said. But these things are useless unless they're utilized in Krishna's service. As it says in the Bhagavatam, a king may have a very heavy crown on his head, but unless it's bowed down before the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it simply serves as a heavy weight, sinking one deeper into material existence. Now, knowledge, even theoretical knowledge, doesn't end with the fact that the body is changing, but the soul is always the same. In the 15th chapter, Krishna says that I enter into the planets, and by my energy, they stay in their orbit. Or as Lord Brahma said, Yat Shaksha Esha Savita Sakala Grahana, that Lord Brahma observes, because he's very intelligent, this universe, and he concludes that the sun, which is full of infinite effulgence, every day we wake up, and even if we don't see the sun directly, but we can understand that because the clouds are lighter, we can see some light through the clouds, or day looks different from night in most parts of the world. That somehow or another present in the sky somewhere is the sun. And that sun is giving us, since time immemorial, or since the creation of this universe, it's giving us unlimited heat and light. As a matter of fact, if the sun moved a little close, if the earth moved a little closer to the sun, then everything on the earth would burn up. And if the earth moved a little further away from the sun, then everything would freeze. We expect that every day when we wake up, we're not either going to freeze to death or burn into ashes, because the sun is maintaining an exact orbit. So Lord Brahma gives the analogy, Sambrita Kala Chakro, that the sun is placed exactly in an orbit. Now in India, they have, probably still have, bulls, very powerful bulls. They can pull a weight that 50 powerful men would have a hard time pulling. And what they do, the farmers, they attach the nose of the bull by a ring. They attach a ring to the nose of the bull and to the rope, or they attach a rope to the ring, and the rope is attached to a pole. And the bull is also attached to a very heavy weight. Now, in order to crush grains, they usually don't have a grinder, but what they do is they have the bull walk around and they have the grains on the ground, and the bull is pulling this very heavy weight, and the very heavy weight is crushing the grains. So though the bull is so powerful, it can pull a heavy weight that 50 grown, powerful men would have a hard time pulling. Still, the bull, with all its power, cannot move 1 inch beyond the rope that it's attached to. Similarly, although the sun is full of infinite effulgence, the scientists say that in one moment, the sun is giving off more heat and more energy than all of human society has utilized throughout its whole known history. So although the sun is so powerful, still it doesn't move 1 inch beyond its orbit. Every day, the sun comes into our vision, if it does come into our vision, but the sun rises at an appointed time, and the sun sets at an appointed time. Now, we ourselves don't know what time usually we're going to wake up tomorrow. Now, if the sun was like us, then one day the sun would get up at 5, next day at 3, go to sleep at 9 or 12, whatever. But the sun is exactly in orbit. So the question is, who is that person who is maintaining the orbit of the sun so exactly? So that's called knowledge. We, in Switzerland, is famous for creating watches, Swiss watch. But that watch was not created accidentally. It was created by intelligent persons who have calculated how the sun is moving and has made a mechanism in order to measure the movements of the sun. Now, as the watch didn't come about by accident, it came about through intelligent people trying to make something precise so that every 24 hours, the little dial comes back to its right place, to the 12 o'clock place. So all these intelligent manufacturers and scientists, jewelers, watchmakers are doing is trying to duplicate the exactitude of the sun. So if it takes intelligent people to do that, how much more intelligent must be the person who's created the sun that's moving around this planet? How much more powerful that person must be to create a sun which is much more accurate than any watchmaker can make a watch, and much more powerful than anyone could duplicate. The scientists say it's come about by accident. So this kind of logic and reasoning is called ignorance. It has nothing to do with science. It is actually science fiction. Science means that if they declare something came about by accident, then they should be prepared to demonstrate how it was an accident. In other words, they should take us into a room and we open the door and out of nowhere a sun appears. And then after that, 5 minutes later, another sun appears, all by accident. But they themselves can't even create a little tiny sun. Let them create a little tiny sun and then put it in a room let them put them in that little tiny sun in a temple, and let the sun circulate in the temple, and especially in the winter, save us so much expenses and heat. Let the little tiny sun they've created heat up the whole room, just circulate. And let it light up the whole room. And at night, the sun you can put a little hood on the sun so you can't see the light anymore. The scientists, they only talk about how everything came about by accident, but they themselves can't even create a little tiny accident with all their so-called intelligence. So if they don't have the intelligence to create the so-called accident, how do they know it came about by accident? If they create a little sun, tiny sun, let it circulate over the North Pole and help out the Eskimos. But they can't do anything. All they can do is talk about accidents. So this is not knowledge. They're not giving knowledge, and what to speak of realized knowledge. They have no real knowledge, nor do they have any realized knowledge. All they have is science fiction, that they're fooling the people by repeating again and again and denying people real knowledge. Or as Srila Prabhupada said, if you light a match in a dark room, then the darkness can't put the match out. So just by explaining to people, your body is changing, but you're not changing, if the people are receptive, if they're honest, if they're interested, then immediately they'll understand how they've been fooled by so-called modern education into developing ignorance, or at least becoming absorbed in the material energy in this earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, without any knowledge of their real self. And what to speak of explaining how there is a controller behind this material energy, and ultimately that controller is actually our friend, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. He's not some impersonal energy, the force or something like that. He's actually the friend of everyone. Otherwise, why did he put the sun in the sky, which is giving us heat and light? Why didn't he just put a big ice cube in the sky so we could freeze to death? No, he provides us with air, he provides us with water, he provides us with food, he provides us with the sun and the moon and so many things, so we can live in this world and hopefully develop God consciousness or live out our karma and learn our lesson the harder way through experiencing the miseries of material existence. So this is actually knowledge. The fact that there's a person behind the universe and that we have an eternal relationship with that person, as Krishna will explain further in Bhagavad Gita, how he's in our heart and supplying remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. That no one is actually independent, we're completely dependent. Just like in this world, people are thinking themselves independent because they're being fooled by foolish people. But at every moment, we're under control. If you go onto the street and you decide to drive your car on the wrong side, the police will come and arrest you, at least in most places, except for India. If you decide that you can do whatever you want, you can run naked in the street. In most places in the world, this will not be permitted. You're not allowed to run naked. You're not allowed to drive your car on the wrong side. You're not allowed to kill anything and everything that you like. So we're always under control. So what to speak of the fact that this material world is also, there's a spiritual controller behind everything. There's a supreme controller. People deny the fact that there is a God, and that God could be a person. But this is just simply not beyond our experience, how a non-person could control everything. We see there's control in the universe, so everyone has knowledge of that, but they've turned that into ignorance by saying that there's no person behind the control. So how can there not be a person? Just like all of us, we have experience, we all had a father and mother, isn't that right? Did anyone here drop in from the sky without father and mother? And we understand that our fathers and mothers also had fathers and mothers. And our grandparents also had fathers and mothers, et cetera, et cetera. So where is the instance, where do we find that one of our great-great-great-grandfathers or grandmothers was a monkey? Anyone have that on their family tree? Some monkey swinging from the tree? Kind of looks like your brother. No, we don't have that experience. What to speak of the monkeys, we don't find monkeys coming from rabbits. If you find a rabbit and you find a little rabbits and find one that looks like a monkey, it would be rather unusual. They all look like rabbits, little rabbits. And what to speak of tracing all these living entities back, we don't find from rocks or from nothing living entities are appearing. We find living entities, these same species of life give birth to the same species of life. And we find that we ourselves, our ancestors, our original father must be a person like we are. Otherwise, how did we become persons? Unless our father was a person, how did we become persons? So the original father must be the supreme person. So this is just normal intelligence. It's called common sense, which has become very uncommon. And because people are working on this theoretical knowledge that life has come out of material energy and that we ourselves are the most intelligent people in the universe, although we're completely in ignorance. We don't even know who we are. We don't know what the purpose of life is. We don't know how to achieve it. Still, we give each other titles and we give each other resources to investigate how to make the material world better than God could have made it. And we can understand that instead of making things better, they're simply creating more and more problems. They may have a lot of energy, just like there are different types of living entities, and they have different types of energy. We have people who are lazy, but they're knowledgeable. They know this about the spiritual soul, but they're not interested in gaining material resources, so they're considered to be lazy by some. Others, they have knowledge, but they're very much interested in gathering material resources, but under the directions of those who have knowledge. So they're active, but they also have intelligence. But there are some, they're very active, but they have no intelligence. And there are others who are inactive, but they have no intelligence. So the worst of the monkeys, for instance, who are very active but have no intelligence, mischievous. So nowadays we have a group of so-called learned persons who are actually in ignorance, who are very active, but they're active causing problems to everyone else, including themselves. Therefore, one has to get real, at least theoretical knowledge. One has to become convinced that we're eternal souls and that there's a supreme person and act according to that. All this so-called scientific advancement, without those two elements of the soul and the super soul, are actually causing great difficulty for people. Of course, the devotees, they can utilize technology in the service of the soul and the service of the super soul. But without those two elements of knowledge, it's just like so many zeros. Who probably gives the example, you may have so many zeros and you add them all together, it only makes zero. But if you add a one in front of all those zeros, then it becomes a very big number. Similarly, without Krishna consciousness, then all our so-called advancement is simply zero. Now, to understand that, we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Krishna himself has provided these guides for us to see things properly. He's accompanying us, he's come with us as a super soul since time immemorial, but he's also provided Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Now, in Shastra, there's examples of how the spiritual energy is working, that there's a spiritual sky, there's spiritual planets, there's spiritual persons with spiritual bodies. This is all good, theoretically. But without some practical working in the material world, then it will not be possible to understand these theoretical ideas of spirit without some removal of our material illusion. Right now, we have to understand that we're in ignorance, being covered by a material body. That ignorance is also covering our senses. We don't see things properly. We don't experience things properly. But we're being encouraged to believe ourselves to be perfect, powerful, and happy. Although we're far from perfect, we're far from powerful, and we're certainly far from being happy. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Naham prakasha sarvasha yogamaya samavrita mudoyam nabijananti lokoyam ajam aviyam. That I'm never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. So if one will not accept the existence of the soul, if one will not accept the existence of the Supreme Soul or the Super Soul, if one will not accept the existence of a Supreme Abode, at least theoretically, we don't have to blindly accept these things. But Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavad Gita, the knowledge itself is actually self-effulgent. The fact that we're not this body, even with a little bit of intelligence, we can understand. The existence of a Supreme Person in this universe, with a little intelligence, we can understand. We may not realize it fully, but we can understand, theoretically at least, the not only possibility, but the plausibility. The fact that it's not only possible, but it's logical. And the other alternative, the fact that we're this body, or there's no control in the universe, is implausible. And practically, we could say it's impossible. Because with a little intelligence, illuminating our consciousness, our understanding of things, we can actually see what's real and which is just illusion. So Krishna says, I'm never manifest. If one doesn't like, to those who are foolish and unintelligent, if one does not like even the idea that there could be a God, or that God could actually know everything, if one doesn't like the idea of following the instructions of the Supreme God, then one will be forced to follow the instructions of those who are in ignorance. In the bodily concept of life, on the material platform of experience, and one will simply become absorbed like they are in trying to further increase our eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, which will simply result in taking another body. Certainly we'll increase our eating in the form of a pig. You don't have to worry, you don't have to read the ingredients on the label, worried that you might get fat. No one has ever heard one pig criticize another pig because he's getting fat. So he's certainly free to eat whatever he likes. He's free to have as much sex as he likes. No one will accuse him of immorality. We've never heard of an immoral pig. We never heard of a pig who didn't try to the best he could to defend himself, although he didn't learn martial arts. Still, he has his own methods of defense. And simply, the pig is, we could say, a liberated soul from, because there's no restrictions. He's liberated from all restrictions, but after all, he's a pig, not a very high level of consciousness. So if one wants to follow the example and instructions of those who are in ignorance, then one will undoubtedly wind up in some species of lower life eventually, and be able to enjoy the senses much better than we can in the human form of life. If one likes to sleep, then who can sleep longer than a bear? At least in America, 6 months the bear is asleep. And no one considers the bear to be lazy. No one goes to the bear and shakes him. Wake up, you've been sleeping 6 months, it's time to get up. No, the bear can sleep as long as he likes and no one's going to disturb him. Similarly, all the other animals have certain ability to enjoy their senses more than human beings can, but they will never understand the existence of themselves as a soul, nor the existence of the Supreme Soul. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, there's theoretical knowledge of Ishvara, Atma, Kala, Prakriti, and Karma. Namely, theoretical knowledge of the Supreme Soul, the Spirit Soul, time, material nature, and karma, the reactions for our activities. So these are necessary for us to understand theoretically so we can act practically, so we can get free from our material entanglement of misidentifying ourselves with these gross and subtle material bodies. And we can at least have the possibility of reviving a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the person who's moving these planets in their orbits, who's created our bodies for us, who's giving us remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Therefore, in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, where it explains about the Purusha avatars, namely Karanadakashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, Shuradakashaya Vishnu, it explains how they've created the universe or universes, how they're managing the universes, how they're entering into our heart and providing us with remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, how the Supreme Lord is totally involved in our everyday existence. That he's created these energies that we describe as earth and water and fire and air and ether, that these are not coming about from nothing, they're coming about from a Supreme Person. How our intelligence is being supplied to us, just like a father supplies instructions to his son, or the teacher supplies instructions to the student. So we're being supplied intelligence by that Supreme Person. As a matter of fact, all living entities are being supplied with knowledge, forgetfulness, and remembrance. And in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, this is explained. Therefore, Prabhupada states in the second canto that it's more important for the neophyte devotee to understand Krishna's pastimes in the external energy, in his role of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the universe, than it is for the conditioned soul to understand Krishna's activities in the internal energy. Therefore, one should not neglect reading the first and second cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita to understand how the material nature is working so that we can avoid getting entangled in it. Then, after one is free, liberated soul, realized soul, vijnanam, then one can actually experience what it means to be engaged in Krishna's internal energy and understand Krishna's activities with his associates in that spiritual energy. At least one can understand clearly without any doubt. So we have to be controlled by some energy, and that energy we have a choice, either Durga, when we think ourselves to be this material body, this material mind, and we follow the intelligence and the inspiration of others who are leaders who are also similarly conditioned like we are. In any case, we can also follow Krishna's direction, and that's called bhakti. Or as it says in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, bhakti mam abhijananti yavanchasmasmi tatvadaha. We can understand Krishna in truth only when we're actually engaged in pure devotional service. Then we can understand who we are, who Krishna is, and who everyone else is, and what everything else is. Just like when the sun comes up in the morning, then in the light of the sun, we can see ourselves, we can see the sun, of course, and we can see everything else in the light of the sun. So only when Krishna reveals himself to us through our sincere efforts at the process of bhakti yoga, our efforts to focus our attention and give our love to Krishna, only by that endeavor does Krishna reveal himself to us and we can understand things as they are. Otherwise, what we're experiencing now, to one degree or another, is simply the results of our past acting in ignorance. Because we didn't understand Krishna fully in the past, we didn't understand who we were in the past, and therefore we acted under the guidance of materialists. Therefore, we've become entangled in the present body we're in. But the only way of disentangling ourselves from the present state of material existence is through the process of pure devotional service. So if we want to become aware, if we want to become peaceful and happy, if we want to do good for others, then we have to take the process of devotional service. We have to learn how to offenselessly chant Hare Krishna. We have to learn how to relate to devotees and to other living entities in a Krishna conscious way. There are many things to learn theoretically and then to apply them practically in order to liberate ourselves from the present ignorance we've created for ourselves by following other misdirected people who are similarly conditioned like we are. Andaya tandira upagiyamana state pisha tandra urudami vada. That the blind are leading the other blind people. So we shouldn't be fooled by titles and by honor given to fools and rascals. But we should be giving our proper respect, our proper attention to those who are actually in a knowledge of the self, the super self, and the supreme self, Krishna. Then we'll actually do good for ourselves and we'll be able to do good for others too. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Question.
Okay.
How to understand qualities of leader that I follow for a good leader or not good?
Good leader means one who's following another good leader. And the ultimate best leader is Krishna. Here in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that we have three enemies, which in modern society people think are their best friends, which is a problem. So those three enemies are lust, anger, and greed. Krishna says the sane person should try to get free from these three enemies because they degrade ourselves as a spiritual being. And one who doesn't try to become free from these three enemies, who follows them very carefully, he can become neither happy nor peaceful, nor achieve the supreme destination. Therefore, we can tell someone who's a proper leader because he repeats what Krishna says. And that's called, what Krishna says is in Shastra. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yak Shastra Vidim Utsrija Vartate Kamakarata, where he says that Tasmat Shastram Pramanam Te Karya Karya Vivastita. One should know what is duty and what is not duty by the revealed scriptures. And knowing such duty, one should act, so one may actually become purified. So that's called Shastra. And we should choose our examples by those who are actually following Shastra. We should choose those who are giving us instruction according to Shastra. Just like nowadays we have this pandemic, and even in ISKCON, the so-called authorities are telling us that we have to get some kind of inoculation because they're devotees, doctors. But a devotee doctor, any doctor, has no knowledge about vaccines. They're in 4 years of medical school, they may be taught, a few hours, some hours about vaccines from the pharmaceutical companies. So they know nothing about, or they may not know anything just because they're medical doctors, because everything is so specialized. But they're declaring because they're devotees, we should follow them blindly. But this is a mix-up. Because in the field of devotion, we follow Krishna's authority. He's our authority. We hear from Krishna and his representatives, and that's called Shrabda Praman. But in the field of material existence, relative existence, where there's 4 defects, imperfect senses, tendency to cheat, being an illusion, and making mistakes, when you're dealing in this material relative world, there's no question of science and blindly following it. Science is supposed to be, you present the evidence, and then it's examined by the scientific method. So to mix up the fact that I'm a devotee, you should follow me because I'm a devotee, and therefore because I'm a doctor, therefore you should follow me blindly because I'm a devotee doctor. It's mixing 2 things together. We follow Krishna. And if you're a devotee and you give Krishna's knowledge, then we follow you. If you're a doctor and you give medical opinions and don't even present any evidence to back them up, then you're cheating. You're just pretending to be an authority on the basis of the fact that you're a so-called devotee, or that you're engaged in the process of devotional service. But but in the field of material existence, if you want to follow your scientific process, then you have to give scientific evidence, not mix the 2 together. Otherwise, you're just pretending. But because the devotees also are sentimental, they don't understand the difference between following Krishna's instructions to realize that we're not this body, and following the materialistic scientists' instructions based upon imperfect experience and knowledge. And what to speak of when someone presents the fact that they're devotees and they're doctors, and therefore you should follow their advice. That's not only unscientific, but it's cheating. They're not presenting any evidence to back up their claim that you should, and what to speak of, they're not acting as an authority for Krishna. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita never said to take a vaccine. As a matter of fact, if we look at Prabhupada's personal experience, his personal instructions, we'll find that Prabhupada thought this modern allopathic medicine, as it says in the Ayurveda, is more or less suitable for traumatic injuries because it's probably the only avenue to treat traumatic injuries. But as far as treating chronic illness, it's in the mode of ignorance. Burning, cutting, destroying in order to get health. That's called the mode of ignorance. In the mode of goodness, one is cured by mantra, regulated diet, etc. In the mode of passion, by herbs and also purification. And in the mode of ignorance, cutting, destroying, and yet they think they're authorities and they're going to mislead the devotees. So this is very unfortunate that devotees are actually taking these persons as authority, or others who are blindly accepting them as an authority. There's no logic and reasoning behind the whole thing. It's simply misuse of sentiment. Does that answer your question or the question? Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Bol.
Jai Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj, for lecture.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare
Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.